What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to take another look at the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G about a year after my original review and go over whether or not it's still a good phone to buy at this point. Now, as always, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. Now, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G has been out for about a year now, and although I was originally expecting there to be an A24 5G, we haven't seen that yet, and at this point, I'm honestly not sure if it's actually going to happen. That being said though, despite being a little bit older now, I do think this phone still actually has quite a bit to offer. Now, we are getting a really good display here with the 6.6-inch 120Hz PLS LCD. We're also getting a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 400, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So in general, the display we're getting here is good in pretty much every way. Sure, on one hand, it doesn't have an AMOLED like some of the higher end A-series phones like the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G for example, but at the same time, the PLS LCD we're getting does look really nice, the colors look good, the display is decently bright, and despite maybe not having the best viewing angles, for what it is, I do think they are pretty decent. But just keep in mind if you're maybe outside in the sun for example, or really in any kind of bright area, it might be a bit more difficult to see. But in general, again, I do think it looks real nice here. The 1080p resolution is also giving us a nice, sharp, crisp image, so that's always good. And with the 120Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen compared to your standard 60Hz display is a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel more premium to use. So in general, when it comes to image quality, despite definitely being more of an affordable phone, especially now that it's been out for over a year, I know you can get some real good deals on it, but yeah, despite this, the image does look really good, so if you're doing stuff like watching videos for example, you will get a good experience. And then of course at 6.6 inches with a 20:9 aspect ratio, the size and dimensions are also really good here as well. So if you're in landscape mode doing something like looking at photos or watching videos, you will get a nice immersive experience. Things are going to look a bit more cinematic. And then for vertical stuff like reading or browsing the web for example, with a form factor like this, you will be able to fit a good amount of content on the screen without having to scroll too much. So definitely a good thing too. So overall, if you are looking for a really affordable 5G phone that has a really nice display, the A23 5G will be a pretty good choice. Now for storage, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we're getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion. So on one hand, not the best, but at the same time, I feel like for a more casual, light user, as long as you're not downloading like a ton of apps and games and stuff like that, you should be at least okay, especially considering again, this phone does have microSD card expansion. So if you have a bunch of photos and videos, for example, you can always offload that stuff onto a microSD card, and that definitely will make a difference. But also keep in mind at this point in 2023, compared to lots of other phones in this general price range, if you are someone who tends to use a bit more space and you want to get maybe 128GB for example, honestly, it's not really that hard to find a more affordable phone that has that much storage. As opposed to the end of 2022 when this phone originally came out, where finding 128GB in a phone like this was a bit more rare. So in general, if storage is really a main priority for you, then even for a phone like this, I do think you can do better. But for the average user, if you're really just looking for a more affordable 5G phone for more light to moderate use, I do think the storage we're getting here will be at least okay. Now for security features, like pretty much every Samsung Galaxy A-series phone, the A23 5G has both face unlock and a fingerprint scanner, with the fingerprint scanner being located right here on the power key. So definitely great to have both options. Not like it's rare or anything, but at the same time, the flexibility is always appreciated. But real quick, let's give the fingerprint scanner a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, this phone does have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, up front, we got a water drop notch for the selfie camera. This camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And then for video, keep in mind, with this phone, we are getting a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. So unfortunately no 4K here, but considering this is more of an entry level phone, I'm not really that surprised. But in general, we are getting a really nice camera setup here when it comes to features. Aside from not being able to record 4K videos, this phone has pretty much everything else, including an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera. So if you are taking a lot of pictures and you're looking for maybe a wider variety of features, then this phone will be a great choice for that. And when it comes to photo quality, I do think the camera we're getting here is really good here as well. Now, obviously when it comes to how good a picture is, this can be kind of subjective, so if you're coming from maybe an older flagship phone like a Samsung Galaxy S10 for example, then it might feel like a bit of a downgrade, but for the average user looking for a more affordable phone, I do think the A23 5G is perfectly fine. And for more casual daily use, if you're doing stuff like maybe Instagram, sending photos to friends and family, using Snapchat, stuff like that, the camera we're getting here will definitely be good enough. Now to give you an idea of what this camera can do, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. So as you can see here, definitely decent photo quality. Again, not nearly as good as a much higher end device obviously, but at the same time for more normal use, I do again think this phone will be perfectly fine. And I feel like this really goes to show for the average user, if you want to get some nice photos here and there, but you don't need like DSLR quality or anything like that, you really don't have to go spend $1,000 on a super high-end flagship phone. You could get something like this, and keep in mind, despite originally going for about $300 factory unlocked when it first came out, the A23 5G nowadays is really not that expensive, especially if you get it from a carrier. Nowadays they do have some really good deals. So my point is, if you do like taking pictures, but you are looking for something a bit more affordable, then in general, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G will be a pretty good choice. Now for the RAM and processor, with the A23 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 895 5G processor. Now I feel like the fact that I've seen this processor in lots of new phones nowadays really just goes to show that despite being over a year old, it still is a great processor. And with the A23 5G, this is really no exception. Despite not being the fastest phone in the world or anything, it's definitely plenty good enough for daily activities like browsing the web, using social media, watching videos, or maybe some light mobile gaming. So if you are doing that kind of thing and maybe you're not really a power user, but you still like to use your phone decently heavily throughout the day, with this phone, I do think you will get a fairly good experience. That being said though, if you are coming from a higher end device, it might feel like a bit of a downgrade, so just keep in mind, like the photo quality and many other things when it comes to phones, whether or not the performance is actually considered good can definitely be subjective, but I do think that for a really affordable device, this phone will be plenty fast enough for most people. Now I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be a performance upgrade for you, because of course depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not actually be. Because again, if you are coming from a higher end device or even maybe another mid-range phone, then it might not necessarily be an upgrade, but if you are coming from a lower end device, then chances are it will end up being pretty solid. But in general, again, I do think that for what it is, the overall performance we get with this phone is fairly good. Now for the battery, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we are getting a 5000 mAh battery that also supports 25W fast charging. So definitely a great battery here. This is a really large battery, so if battery life is important to you, you're not going to be disappointed. In my experience, this phone lasts for multiple days now. Of course, your mileage may vary. If you're using your phone to play like Call of Duty all day, it's obviously not going to last as long as if you're just using it normally. But I do think that relative to most phones like this, if battery life is important to you, then you will get a good experience here. And then of course, down the road as the battery degrades, which all batteries do eventually, with this phone, it will last quite a bit longer than a phone with a much smaller battery. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a while without having to replace it, then this phone will be great for that too. And when it comes to charging speed, keep in mind 25W fast charging is on one hand not the best out there, but for a phone like this is pretty much as good as you can possibly expect, unless you get like a OnePlus that has 50W fast charging or something like that, but that really is just OnePlus and maybe a couple other odd phones out there. At this point in 2023, I feel like even higher end devices don't typically have insane fast charging, but I do think for what it is, the charging speed on this phone is pretty decent. But keep in mind, at least with the standard version you get through either a carrier or unlocked or whatever, the A23 5G does not come with a wall adapter. It does actually have a double-sided USB-C cable, but again, unfortunately, there's no wall adapter here. So if you don't have one already, you will have to get your own, and keep in mind, to fully utilize the fast charging, you will need a 25W charger, which again, this phone doesn't come with any charger, so I do recommend getting a 25W charger if you don't have one already, because when it comes to charging speed, that definitely will make a difference. Now for the software, the A23 5G does have Android 13, and keep in mind, Samsung does have really good software support, so this phone will be getting Android 14 pretty soon, along with 15 and 16 down the road. So if you are looking for something that maybe isn't the newest but still has a couple more years of software support, then this phone will be a great choice. Now when it comes to other features, the A23 5G does have NFC, and in case you don't know, NFC is the technology behind Tap and Pay. so if you like to use tap and pay, then you'll be happy to know you can use it with this phone no problem. In addition to this, unlike phones like the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G or the A53 5G, the A23 5G, as you can see here, does actually still have a headphone jack, so if you do like to use normal wired headphones, then keep in mind you can with this phone. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G about a year after my original review. Now on one hand, is this phone really anything special? Personally, in my opinion, I would say no. At this point in 2023, for $300 or less, you can get plenty of phones like this. In fact, for $300, I would definitely not buy this phone. I mean, sure, it may have been kind of worth that when it originally came out, but nowadays, you can probably get something like a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE or a Google Pixel 6a or who knows what else for really not that much more. That being said though, again, carriers still do have this phone and they are offering some really good deals. So chances are, if you get this phone, you won't be paying anything near full price. And if you can get this phone for free or close to it, and you're really not looking for anything fancy, just a solid device for consuming content, maybe taking pictures, and just using the phone as a phone for basic daily activities, I really think for that kind of use, even a year after it came out, you really can't go wrong with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. But this concludes my 1-year review of the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.